2022 marks the fifth season at the helm for Scott Frost as the head coach of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. However, this 2022 season has to be the season where things finally start to turn around for this program. Frost is coming into the season on the hot seat. CoachesHotSeat.com has him as the number one coach on the hot seat. Rightfully so, considering the expectations that were on Scott Frost the moment that he took this job. I remember the day it was announced he'd be the next head coach. There was a lot of hype, a lot of excitement, a lot of optimism that this team was going to really turn a big corner and they're going to be contenders, not only in the Big Ten, but on a national level. And so far, Scott Frost is 15-29 as the head coach for the Huskers. Now, don't get me wrong. That record can look a lot better than what it is. But this Nebraska team, they are the LA Chargers of college football. Every single season, there's a lot of hype, a lot of excitement, a lot of optimism. But they go back to their old ways. Losing one-possession games. Losing in heartbreaking fashion. Beating themselves in games. But the good news is, every single season is the opportunity for a fresh start. And Nebraska, they were really aggressive in the transfer portal and by hiring new assistants. Some of the names they got in the transfer portal in the offseason: Casey Thompson, Trey Palmer, O'Shawn Mathis, Stephon Wynn, Kane Williams, Omar Brown. A few of the new hires assistance-wise for Nebraska, the three that stick out to me: Mark Whipple, the offensive coordinator. Last year for Pittsburgh had one of the best offenses statistically in college football. Kenny Pickett was also a Heisman Trophy finalist and a first-round pick in April's NFL draft. Mickey Joseph, the former wide receivers coach at LSU, he has created NFL talent in Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, two of the best young receivers in the NFL, if not the two best young receivers in the NFL. And Donovan Raiola, the offensive line coach who was formerly with the Chicago Bears. And a big concern going into last season was the offensive line. Despite being talented, they lacked experience. And for the 2022 season, you could argue that's the same case, as only two of the starting five offensive linemen from last season are returning for the 2022 season. In fact, the Huskers as a whole, only 10 returning starters. But with their moves in the transfer portal, O'Shawn Mathis will be starting. Casey Thompson, starting quarterback. Trey Palmer is going to be likely the go-to receiver. Worst case scenario, a number two option behind Omar Manning. I do also want to address that Nebraska also got Devin Drew out of Texas Tech to add into their pass rush. But it is time for me to get into what you are all here for, and that is the season predictions. Now, I'm not going to list off what's going to be a win and what's going to be a loss. I'm just going to kind of just go over what I think are the guaranteed wins for this team and maybe even the guaranteed losses or leaning towards a loss or a win. I'm not really going to give a full prediction. I'm just going to go over at the end what I think the ceiling is going to be for this team and what the potential floor is. The 2022 season kicks off for the Huskers August 27th against Northwestern, and this should be an easy win for Nebraska as they dismantled Northwestern last year 56-7 in what was their best game of 2021 and maybe even one of, if not the best game in the Scott Frost era. I feel like there's absolutely no reason Nebraska does not win this game against Northwestern. The first home game of the year is against North Dakota, and this, honestly, is going to be known as a scrimmage game for them. Really not much to talk about here. Following week against Georgia Southern, who is going to have a brand new offense for the 2022 season, as this should and better be another easy win for Nebraska, as they should start off 3-0, and let's be honest, they better start 3-0 based off of this level of competition they're playing. Which leads us into the showdown against Oklahoma. This should be the game that College Game Day visits that week, as both teams, they should be in the top 25. Plus the history of this rivalry, I feel like no reason College Game Day doesn't visit Lincoln for game day that week. And this is going to be the game where we will get an idea of the potential of this team, not only down the stretch for the 2022 season, but the program as a whole. Beating a team like Oklahoma, that's going to impact recruiting and even in the transfer portal, as the transfer portal is becoming a big thing now, not only in college football, but in college sports. And if they win this game, I think the sky is the limit for this team. But if they lose, it depends on how they lose. If they lose like the way they did last season, in a game where they were in it from start to finish, and they had the opportunity to win, but they beat themselves. Or if they get some morale if they lose this game. Will it be more of the same where they keep losing games by one possession? Or are they going to at least find some confidence after this game? Because after that, the schedule, it gets a little more simpler before the stretch in November. So if they lose to Oklahoma, they just can't let the loss get to them, no matter how much they lose by. After a bye week, they take on Indiana at home, and this honestly should be another easy win for Nebraska. As Indiana, they did have the one good season in 2020, but I think that's all Indiana's going to be known for. I feel like Indiana is a one-season wonder, and Tom Allen is on the hot seat for the Hoosiers going into the 2022 season. Their next game is on the road against Rutgers, and this is a Friday night game. On paper, Nebraska should win this game handily. If they play just decently, they should and probably will win this game. But sometimes you just never know with games like this on a short week. Some examples I remember. Clemson went on the road against Syracuse on a Friday night, and they lost. That same night, Washington State was, I believe, number 8, and they got blown out by Cal. One time on a Thursday night, USC was number 1 in the country, went on the road against Oregon State, and lost. So as much as this game should be marked as an easy win for Nebraska, I wouldn't be surprised if this was one of the games that they lose that they're not supposed to, because it seems like every single season there's always one game where Nebraska loses that they're not supposed to. Either that game is a candidate for that, or against Minnesota on November the 5th, which I'll get to in a little bit. But I'd put this in the win column for Nebraska. Maybe a bit premature, but I think it'll be okay. The next week, they go on the road to take on Purdue, and I am not sure what to expect out of Purdue this season. I feel like Purdue is either going to fly under the radar and be in contention for the Big Ten West, or they're going to go 7-5, or even 6-6. There's always one or two teams that fly under the radar for a season. I think 2022's candidate, that could potentially be Purdue. I think Aiden O'Connell, I think he has Heisman Trophy finalist dark horse kind of upside. Even though Purdue lost their best receiver because he became ineligible academically, I still have confidence in this Purdue team going to 2022. I just think there's no in between on they'll be contention, maybe winning the Big Ten West or going 7-5, 6-6, nothing in between. So this game is in question for me. We're now in the home stretch of the college football season, November the 5th against Minnesota. And I did note earlier that this could be a game that Nebraska loses despite being expected to win. I think Minnesota is going to be underrated this season. Tanner Morgan and Mo Ibrahim, they are back for one final season. Mo Ibrahim, I think, is the most underappreciated running back in the entire country. He just doesn't really get talked about as much. And he was doing really well against Ohio State in the opener last year until he left the game with an injury, and it turned out that that would be a season-ending injury. But Mo Ibrahim is back. And if the defense, if they can contain him in this game, then I think Nebraska should win that game, but I think it's still up in the air. Then they go on the road to take on Michigan in the Big House. And even though I am not sold on Michigan repeating what they did last year, beating Ohio State in dominant fashion, winning the Big Ten championship game in dominant fashion, and going to the college football playoff, I am not sold on Michigan doing that again. But I do think this Michigan team will still be good enough to beat Nebraska on November the 12th. This is a game where I would lean it towards Nebraska losing this game, but I have it as still in question because there's a lot that can still play out from that can and will probably play out between the season opener and November the 12th. But right now, I would lean it towards a loss, but still up in the air, considering the circumstances. Senior Day against Wisconsin, and this is a game that I think can and will go either way. I view Wisconsin as one of the most overrated teams in college football. A team that lives and dies off the running game. A team that consistently has one of the best defenses in the entire country. But what they're missing is good quarterback play. Graham Mertz isn't the answer. I don't care what anyone says. Graham Mertz is not a good quarterback. Graham Mertz was the reason why Wisconsin lost in their opener to Penn State last year. 185 yards, 2 interceptions. Against Notre Dame, when they got blown out 41-13. 4 interceptions in that game. Only completed 43.9% of his passes. Last season, Graham Mertz had 10 touchdown passes and 11 interceptions. Graham Mertz, I don't even think I can consider him a game manager at best. Considering Wisconsin, they usually win their games off the running game. In Wisconsin's best win last year against Iowa, Graham Mertz was 11 for 22 for 104 yards. So if Nebraska contains Wisconsin's running game and they force Graham Mertz to have to win the game, I like Nebraska's chances. But I think it's still too early to call. As usual, the regular season ends against Iowa, and Iowa currently has, I believe it's a 7-game winning streak against Nebraska. If there was going to be a year where the losing streak against Iowa could and would end, it would be this season. because the last few seasons, despite being on the losing end, Nebraska has been in those games from start to finish. They had the opportunities to win each of those games, but they ended up losing in heartbreaking fashion. I honestly would lean this towards a Husker win, but I think it's too early to make it official. But if I had to guess, I think that this is going to be a potential win for the Huskers. A lot to still take place throughout the year going into this game. But with Nebraska's recent history against Iowa being so close but yet so far away, it's only a matter of time until they're beating Iowa. And this could easily be the season where it happens. I'm going to wrap things up with the ceiling versus the floor. The ceiling I have at 9-3. The floor I have 7-5, 6-6, 5-7, which is the absolute worst case scenario. But given the history, as much as I don't think 5-7 will happen, sometimes it is best to lower the expectations a little bit. Now, the 2 early to call games, I have 5 of them. At home against Oklahoma, at Purdue, at Michigan, at home against Wisconsin, and at Iowa. I lean the Oklahoma game towards a loss at this point, as on the road against Michigan. But at Purdue, at home against Wisconsin, and at Iowa, I think Purdue, I'd lean that towards a win for the Huskers, as well as on the road against Iowa. So that is kind of where that 9-3 ceiling comes from. Winning 2 of those 5 games are too early to call games. Or the floor worst case scenario, they lose all 5 of these games. 6-6, they lose all 5 games in one game that they aren't supposed to lose, but they lose anyway. 5-7, again, it's just the worst case scenario, which I don't think will happen. But comment your record prediction for the Nebraska Cornhuskers for the 2022 season. Also like, share, comment, other things, and subscribe. And until next time, have a wonderful day.